Panels have always offered a rich texture to the NAI annual meeting, and this year will be no different. As you can see from the chairs next to me, we are about to transition to a really exciting gathering of individuals, and it is our VPR panel, our Vice Presidents for Research panel, always a fan favorite at the NAI annual meeting. This year, our first panel is sponsored by Texas Tech University, and to introduce the panel is Cameron Smith. He is the Commercialization Director at Texas Tech University, and of course, we are all familiar with the fact that Texas Tech is not only a powerhouse of innovation, it is one of NAI's sustaining members. So please help me in welcoming Cameron Smith.
As she said, I'm the director of the Research and Commercialization Office for Texas Tech University, and we actually serve the Texas Tech University system. Big thank you to the NAI. This is a fantastic conference. We all recognize that, invention is kind of a niche, and, we love playing in this world, and it's fantastic there's an organization like NAI to champion that. Big thank you to Dr. Robert Duncan, who's on the board of NAI and really helped get the chapter established in Lubbock, Texas, and we're even working on our El Paso chapter as well for our institution out there. Our president of the El Paso institution is actually going to be on a panel tomorrow. And then we also have Dr. Sam Preen here, who will be inducted as a fellow tonight. Just briefly about Texas Tech University system, we do about $300 million a year in research. You've heard today already on a couple of presentations about this change in the culture of innovation, and Texas Tech University is no different. We're implementing a lot of the things you heard Notre Dame talk about with their Idea Center. And, it's really paying off. Innovation is growing and really snowballing across the Texas Tech University system. License activity, you guys all know those metrics we report. License activity is doubled over the past couple of years. Revenue is up. And most importantly, our faculty engagement is up. We're really, really engaging our faculty in the whole invention and innovation process. So again, I do want to thank the NAI, and with that, and we're happy to sponsor this panel of esteemed VPRs. And with that, I'd like to bring out Rodney Ho, professor at University of Washington, to moderate the panel. Thank you.
Do you want to send him out?
Thank you very much, Cameron. I have a pleasure to introduce 4 of the distinguished VP for research from different universities to share with us today. And I will let them introduce themselves. The first one coming in is Elizabeth and Walt and Imar and Matt. So I would like to ask them to tell you about themselves a little bit by sharing their name, the institutions they're presenting, and also their role in facilitating the missions to encourage innovations and inventions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I cannot see any of you. It's a little unusual. It's a little unusual sitting in this chair. My name is Betsy Cantwell. I'm the Senior Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of Arizona, and my portfolio includes pretty much everything you would imagine of traditional VPR plus an entirely new innovation and entrepreneurship portfolio. Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you so much for the opportunity to join in with our conversation today and look forward to our engagement as a panel and also with each of you. I'm Walt Copan. I am the Vice President for Research and Technology Transfer at Colorado School of Mines. I joined there last year, having served as the director of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and also as a long career, also as an entrepreneur and as a venture capitalist. The responsibilities at Mines are really looking at all aspects of the research portfolio and connecting it purposefully with the network of innovators and entrepreneurs, the ecosystem for investment and for corporate growth. And we're just delighted within Colorado also to have the highest concentration of federal laboratories outside of the Washington, D.C. area. And so it's a great opportunity to engage in partnership across that entire region. Thanks.
Rima.
Good afternoon, anonymous friends and colleagues. I know that we have many friends in the audience. I wish I could recognize them. I'm Elnashai. I'm the Vice President for Research and Technology Transfer at the University of Houston. Next month, I will be completing 5 years there. So whatever is happening there, good or bad, I am to blame. I went to UH from Penn State, and I'm very happy to note that there are Penn State colleagues in the audience. I was Dean of Engineering there. And before that, I was at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And actually, there are people from UIUC in the audience as well. Before that, I was a professor at Imperial College London. And definitely, there's nobody from Imperial College here. We have embarked on a big experiment 5 years ago to manage the research enterprise in a slightly different way, to manage it from the center, to lead with the strategies, not just supporting the faculty, but also leading the effort. It seems that the numbers indicate that we are having some success. Delighted to be here and looking forward to the discussions.
All right, Matt.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? It's great to be here. My name is Matt Hulver. I am the Vice President of Research at Arizona State University, so right down the road. I'm new. I've been at Arizona State now just over 7 months, where I came from Virginia Tech, where I spent almost 17 years. If you're finding it very warm here, so am I, because we haven't been here long enough, and we're adapting to heat. So.
It's a dry heat.
That's what they say. 115, really, really hot, regardless. So in my role as Vice President of Research, everything that is important for keeping the research train on its tracks, from compliance to pre and post award to research development, is within my portfolio, and making sure we have the resources and the scale to support a growing enterprise. It's an exciting time to be at Arizona State. We're 7 years running as #1, ranked by U.S. News and Reports, #1 in innovation, 7 years running. Our research expenditures are, I think, growth 5 times over the last 10 years. So we're in a large growth phase. So it's really exciting. So it's not just the research infrastructure to keep that going and sustain that and grow it. It's also working with the associate deans for research, the academic units, and developing strategy as well. So I'm happy to be here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing about where you are and what you do. And you can see that in the room, we have these vast experience and wisdom to share with us. And so today we talk a lot about culture at the academic institutions. Would you like to describe the culture of innovations and inventions on your campus and any lessons you have learned or success you have experienced, and how it shaped you in setting policy, setting strategy, specifically around this inclusiveness, equity, and access to all people across economic and social, ethnic, sectors, and other spectrums. So I'd like to invite Dr. Copan to comment on it, and then other can then come in and say a few more things.
Sure, yeah, let me kick that off. And thanks so much, Rodney. It's such an important question. As someone who's been involved in the business world for a lot of my career, I think back on the comments made by Peter Drucker, who said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And he's referring, of course, to the fact that by paying attention to the culture of an organization and building it, which is clearly a long-term proposition, the greatest results can be achieved. So at Mines, and I mentioned I'm relatively new there, less than a year on the job after my time in federal service. We are collectively focused on organizational culture. And the concentration there is really to create and sustain productivity in the research enterprise, and also the impact for technology transfer, for innovation, and the outcomes that we seek to achieve to make a difference in the world. Mines is a highly research active university, and R1 university. It's the right size, relatively small in comparison with some of my peers here on the podium. And balancing research and innovation, as well as the educational enterprise, is really a top priority. Several years ago, Wall Street Journal did an analysis of US universities, and Mines was the #2 ranked university nationally for combining research and instruction. And so the kind of message around culture that we have been delivering on a consistent basis is one of an inclusive culture of excellence in research and innovation that is both interdisciplinary and collaborative, with a focus on creating positive societal impact. That statement is actually on the back of my business card. And in many ways, the culture of the university is also influenced by its partners. And about 20% of the research funding from the university is actually sponsored by industry. And so that use-inspired research, the problems that matter in the economy and in society, really lead to the kind of cultural conversations and the interdisciplinary mindset to focus on the big problems. And so to me, building culture starts from day one in the institution, in setting expectations for faculty, for students, for leadership, for staff alike. Establishing that common language and communicating the organization's values in the field of innovation, of course, and throughout life, everyone counts for the research and innovation enterprise. And so every perspective needs to be brought on. And so bringing together a culture where it's expected that you'll bring diversity of background, diversity of experience, and diversity in all its aspects are essential to build that kind of ongoing culture for interdisciplinary performance. As with every organization, we're on a journey at Mines, and some of the approaches that we have taken are really built around concepts such as humanitarian engineering, which brings together the perspectives of science and technology and society, and the kinds of projects that students at the undergraduate and the graduate level are engaged in so often deal with people in all walks of life within the state and also internationally. Mines is the #1 ranked global school for mining engineering and for minerals engineering. And so that brings so many global engagements as well that builds further that culture of diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Walt. I wonder, anyone else want to add on to that?
I might add just one. I'd really like to underscore, because I think it's true for all of us, that this cultural focus on impact makes a huge difference. And the one thing I'd like to add on to that is we take the opportunity, and it really is impactful in looking at equity and inclusion, which, as you know, in innovation circles is not necessarily, and particularly in startups and in the world of innovators, and ask our students, and particularly students in different affinity areas, what's the innovation impact you would like to have, and see if, because they will, in fact, push the faculty, they will lead the institution, they will push us in directions that are very useful to listen to and hear.
If I may add a couple of words, and I agree that culture is extremely important. I also see a very major role for strategy. It depends on how the strategy is developed. If the strategy is developed in a collaborative manner, then maybe a strategy can eat culture for lunch. And then they can share, maybe share dinner together or something and work together. So I think that there has been a significant strategy implementation impetus at UH in particular. Of course, the research enterprise and the innovation enterprise at UH is not 100 years old. Maybe 15 years ago, when my boss was appointed as the president, the research enterprise was very small. And under her leadership, of course, it's expanded very significantly. So we really built a mix of strategy and culture and trying to keep them on the same dining table at all times.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, you want to add? Oh, you okay? So it's very important to have the culture and also preconceived ideas to actually measure and also implement what is the outcome and so forth that we can implement. We go on to the next questions. Thank you. Would you please share how you and your organizations currently engages with the community and specifically with the private sectors? After all, they may fund the projects, they may fund your translation activity, they may become partners of your product translations to make the impact, right? So translations are academic inventions that will benefit the eventual society. So it's a long journey together. So I wonder, you can comment on it, Ahmad, you start?
Sure. Of course, the answer is very much a function of where the university is operating. If I was at Illinois, it would have been a very different setup where Champaign-Urbana is quite small and we have to reach out regionally and perhaps nationally, even internationally. In the case of Houston, I believe that we have an easier task than most because of the historical relationships between the various industries. You have the aerospace industry. NASA and UH have been partners in various educational programs for years. You have the medical center just maybe 3-4 miles away with lots and lots of interactions. And then you have, of course, the oil and gas, the energy capital of the world. And this is the largest university in the city. Of course, Rice is an incredibly high quality institution, but at the end of the day, UH with its 4 universities has some 75,000 students and Rice has 6,000. So it's smaller than the College of Engineering at UH. So we can influence the workforce in a way that no other university can. Of course, the 2 big universities are close to Houston, but they are not in Houston. So that actually immediately dictates how we operate to both encourage faculty to get us to know about their inventions and bring industry in to take a look at the IP that we have and see how can we progress in licensing. So we have basically 2 models. One is the institution-led and one is the inventor-led. The inventor-led is usual. I mean, each one of us as a researcher knows where to go and whom to contact and so on. Sometimes the faculty don't know what to give away and what not to give away. And we sometimes are called into a discussion when the cat has been slaughtered already. And so we try to reconstitute and try to see how can we recover from a significant giveaway. Sometimes happens, not always. But we have also our model of communicating with industries in a systematic way. We have established tools, if you like. We have a very significant tool called the Tech Map. The Tech Map is an app that was developed at UH over the last 3 years. It has ingested all companies and entities and startups and incubation space and everything that has to do with innovation into one app. And there is nothing like it on the market. And hence, everybody is giving us their data. And when they give us their data, we start the dialogue. We know who is doing what. They know what are we about. We send them emissaries, we send them brochures, and so on. So if we look at both the model of institutional-led and following the inventor when she or he makes a contact, we try to get in early so that we can preserve the rights of the university. I think this model works pretty easily in a city as large as Houston. As you know, it's fourth largest city in the US and number 1 in growth. That's it from us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So this is the questions for Matt. So funding is one of the key assets needed in terms of in the space of academic research and inventions and translation. How would you describe from your vintage about the current conditions? You know, I know the Houston experience may be very different from Arizona to Colorado. Maybe you can lead the discussions.
Yeah, great question. You know, we've already talked about impact, and I think when we think of the funding mechanisms that support, you know, our science within our institutions, and you think about the ability to kind of mobilize and solve grand challenges. You know, these funding mechanisms aren't built to do that. I think SBIRs and STIRs are good, but are they really reflecting what the market pool is and what's needed to truly push the envelope across the translational spectrum? And so I think as we think it in my position and we think about impact, we truly are thinking on a solution-oriented approach, you know. And as a VPR, at the higher level of an institution, we are not here to dictate what our faculty are doing and how they're mobilizing our talents. But I think as we recognize those talents, as we work with the academic unit leaders and the ADRs and understand where the talents exist, we're really taking an approach to think grand challenge oriented. How can we coalesce talent in geographical proximity around ideal resources, converging disciplines to truly move the needle across the translational spectrum? So I'll walk you through an example of that. I've spent my last 20 years largely working in the health space studying metabolism. And at ASU, we're thinking some of approaches. Let's take, for example, the top leading causes of death. You know, we have heart disease, we have cancer, we have diabetes, obesity is a piece of that. And we're going through an exercise now where we're thinking, what are underlying pieces of that we can coalesce talent and bring people together? And one thing we're thinking about is human behavioral decisions, for example. We're not going to move the needle in that space in many of these problems unless we start to converge disciplines. And so we're starting to think about approaches. How can we, if we're putting a neuroscientist that's studying neurophysiology of impulsivity in the same space where a biomedical engineer is thinking of new modalities for deep brain stimulation or wearables that are going to drive biofeedback and decision making, they need to be in the same room of someone that's thinking about social determinants of health to someone that's thinking about dissemination and implementation science. And so what I'm getting at here is can we better inform the models we're using for discovery? Can we, one, fail faster? Or can we speed up the rate by which we're translating discovery and inventions to having true impact? You know, I think the current number, I believe, from discovery of a potential target in drug discovery to actual, if it makes it through the pipeline, we're talking 19 to 20 years. How can we speed that up? So that's kind of how we're working at ASU, is to think about how can we recognize where the talents are. Our charter, the clarity of our charter is it speaks for itself to advance research for public good, to hold ourselves accountable to the communities we serve, and we're really thinking that way and being a more solution-oriented approach and coalescing that talent that way. If we do that, I think the research expenditures, the grant awards are going to come.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'd like to save some time for the audience to ask questions. So I'd like to pose the last questions to Betsy. You know, next generation, training next generations, the pipeline, and encouraging everyone to participate in this journey is very important. I myself have benefited from some students actually spin off and start up and make it to the NASDAQ. And so I'd like to ask Betsy about, you know, initially we make assumptions that identifying and encouraging these next generations of inventors to take part in this journey together. But, you know, from your vintage point of view and your perspective, what is the current pipeline situations and how we can do better?
That is also a great question, and I think all of us that are affiliated with universities have really interesting answers to that. So I'm going to answer by sort of telling a parable about my job, because it was created in 2019. I'm the first occupant of this Senior Vice President for Research and Innovation position at the University of Arizona, and it was created to pull research together with our prodigious tech parks. These were all separate organizations. Our tech transfer, our economic development, and the big hole in that ecosystem was our support system for students in the community. So we created immediately a new component of the organization called the Forge, which stands for Finding Opportunities and Resources for Growing Entrepreneurs. And it has three purposes, and we sort of are, you know, we're in our third year, so we're living them out. The first is inspiring and cultivating an entrepreneurial mindset in all of our students. So that really is student-wide. We work with all the colleges and all the deans, and we build physical spaces where we can deliver entrepreneurial mindset content. We advance the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that's not just in southern Arizona where we live. We also have large components of our university in Phoenix here, and we work across the state because we're the land-grant university. We work in every single one of the cooperative extension offices in the state of Arizona, delivering entrepreneurial mindset services, if you will. And we drive scale-up and launch acceleration of the most promising startups. And when you start focusing on students in the community, then your system of mentors and your system of advisors is a little different than might be the traditional advisors that we would use for the tech transfer arm, where we have mature faculty who have been trained, who have got their own IP or starting their own startup. So in the name of time, I'm going to actually just add one thing about this particular model, because while I make lots of unpleasant noises, is that it gives us the opportunity to address diversity and inclusion in a very unique way. We get to start with student affinity groups that have asked, for instance, female students have said, we would really like content and classes and a place for us to become entrepreneurs. We would like mentors that are specific to us. We are working with, and this has just started, so it's very new, Native nations in the state of Arizona who have said, we would like content, we would like to work with you and help us understand how we develop entrepreneurs in our own community. The capacity is kind of endless to take this model and create special support groups. And I will tell you, I think all of you who've looked at the literature know, just in the startup world alone, those places where, and I've looked mostly at the literature around female founders, where their affinity groups can be created and where support systems can be created for female founders that have as many women as possible in that support system. The results, even the successes of those companies are significantly higher. So this gives us we have a really broad group of amazing supporters from around the country. Actually, VentureWell is a support system for some of these affinity groups. And I will end there. I know I've gone far enough, but I just offer that as an example of how to get the next generation going.
All right. Thank you, Betsy. In the closing, is there any last-minute comment that you may have about how NEIS organizations can support your journey from your vantage point? One sentence.
One sentence.
Anyone
Anybody
can
else
start.
feel like going first?
Go ahead, Matt.
One sentence in closing, and I think perhaps something NAI can do is the flexibility of funding we have at our disposal right now, I think, to really push the translational spectrum from ARPA-H and SF engines. Perhaps being a force in Washington, D.C., and thinking of opening funding mechanisms and leveraging for funding mechanisms that can truly be not only in the fundamental research, but figure out ways to move that fundamental research to application. I don't think we have that funding to really be flexible at this point.
I think NAI is doing extremely well. The publicity that comes with what happens with senior members, the election of fellows is just inspiring and makes the faculty focus on not just getting the papers and citations and getting promoted, but also looking at wanting to be one of those. So I think NAI is doing great.
Wonderful. And Walt?
NAI has a wonderful opportunity to advocate for the future of invention and innovation in this country and also in the global context. There's so much noise in Capitol Hill now. We've seen attempts to weaken the Bayh-Dole Act and march-in rights. We've seen actions taken to really undermine the clarity of intellectual property rights that are central to innovation, central to impact in society, as we've been talking about today. So NAI needs to continue to be that clear voice on behalf of the inventor community for the future of the country and to avoid collateral damage to the legislative underpinnings of technology transfer and innovation.
All right. Betsy, do you have any?
I've now had a little bit of time to think of one sentence.
Okay.
So I'm going to try. But in the spirit of the rise of the rest, NAI has an incredible opportunity to really evangelize the ability of everybody to be an inventor. And you're big enough and strong enough and well enough known that taking that on in conjunction with universities is a noble task.
So you can be cited on the congressional record. All right. With that, I will open the questions to the audience.
Yeah. This is Jenny Yang from Georgia State University. I'm also going to have many inventions and more than 30 patent applications. And also I'm a founder of Enlighten Biosciences. I'm so happy to have this section because myself as faculty, Regents professor, and also as entrepreneur, facing challenges really is how to educate the leaders. One of the challenges we have, especially from VPR office, is how to manage conflict of interest. That is something, is a big battle I'm fighting like hell because I'm largely leveraged federal funding, for push forward for the research. But yet, the lawyers, the leaders, don't worry about. That is something I truly feel, love to hear you guys to give the guidance, to educate the leaders, and to really help people like us. That's number one question, but I'll wait for the second.
Thank you for the comment. I think it's more of a comment than the questions. Is there anyone want to?
I would say one comment on your comment is, at least at universities, I find the best approach to dealing with that is to actually genuinely convene open conversation and allow and actually force as many faculty and members of our community as possible to become part of that conversation. So we have actual experiences to take forward to our members of Congress. We have to have those voices. We can't really, it doesn't work as well if we're speaking on our high horse. We have to bring the voices together. It helps a lot.
Bringing a stakeholder on the table to discuss.
Yeah.
Right.
If I can just add a comment there too. Legislators and leaders need to understand that conflict of interest is something that is natural in the whole community of innovation. And so understanding that this is a practice requiring transparency and requiring an agreed management process is something that is an important dialogue to have internally with stakeholders and also externally with those who write policy. I must also say that it is challenging in the federal sector where you have people with a federal mindset and thinking about themselves as federal employees, which bring additional requirements. So this is one of the reasons while I was the NIST director that we launched a legislative initiative called the Return on Investment Initiative to actually modernize policy to also look at the future of conflict of interest management.
It would be very helpful if we have such policy can be shared. So therefore, I can take to my leaders to tell them.
Yeah, we can take. Yeah, we can take it offline and perhaps.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can you say your name and your institution?
Adriana
first?
Montaño, St. Louis University. Thank you so much. It was very nice talk that you gave. So one of the concerns that I have is engagement of our faculty members in innovation. Which specific efforts you have led regarding incentives for our faculty inventors? Because, sometimes it's hard to just do something that is so long. It takes really long to make sure that your invention really will bring something, right? We just dream of something and propose something, and eventually fruits will come, right? However, I think that engaging our faculty members by giving the appropriate incentives can help in the process. Do you have any examples from your institution?
Okay. So anyone want to take that faculty incentive
I have a short answer, which is you celebrate the heck out of every step of we have celebrations for everything. And what our faculty see, and our deans are completely involved, is that they get to be celebrated. And that's a huge incentive.
If I may offer also a thought, we started the program 4 years ago, the Technology Bridging Fund. Now, I'm sure that most universities have something similar. And we advertise it very heavily that if you think that you have an idea and came out of a research project and now the money has run out and the student has left, graduated and so on, come to us and we discuss and we can dispense of up to $75,000 to continue with this telephone conversation at an interstate. So, you know, this is not just for those who actually apply, but it attracts the attention of others. I think, okay, if I have this last step that I need to take, there's somebody to stand by my side.
I think one of the other things I'd like to add there is so often faculty think that they can become a CEO and they've gone through maybe an I-Corps program, but the people who are genuinely wired to lead an entrepreneurial enterprise are a small minority. And so celebrating absolutely, recognizing in performance appraisals and in the promotion and the tenure process the importance of this journey. I know that there's a national effort underway to look at recognition and reward. Taking that into account, I strongly recommend that the universities who are here, part of the NAI network, can participate very effectively there. But perhaps most importantly is to surround your faculty and your entrepreneurial faculty in particular with a kind of support network, the business leadership that can actually help effectively take the technology from the laboratory to the market with their support.
Okay. Thank you. Next questions.
Rock Mackey, University of Wisconsin. Medical schools have a huge advantage in universities. Why is that? Because beside them, there's usually a hospital or a healthcare system. So there's effectively a not-for-profit business partnering with faculty in a medical school. So why can't universities do that in other colleges? For example, why don't universities organize consulting groups of faculty in engineering schools to provide effectively not-for-profit support for clients? The same thing could be done at the School of Agricultures. This would do more, I think, for the climate of entrepreneurship than anything else I can think of inside a university.
Okay. Anyone want to take that question? Matt?
Yes. You know, at ASU, we have the J.R. and Edson Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute, and that's designed just for that, to embrace the students and the faculty and even external potential partners of how to navigate that process and develop ideas and how to begin to market that, how you would navigate the intellectual property aspect. So that's working very well for ASU.
Yeah. Thank you. Good point.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Paul Soul, Florida High Tech Corridor. First, a comment, Betsy, I'm completely with you on the idea of community engagement, affinity groups. We're 23 counties across Florida. We've got USF, UCF, and UF is the three big ones. I'm particularly passionate about neurodiversity. Read the book Divergent Mind, and you'll begin to see just yet another group that is so creative and involved in what we're talking about. Here's the question. What I haven't heard today, and I know at the VP of research level, especially Sylvia with you and other VPs of research, y'all talk, which is good. Share with us, or maybe you don't. I'm a Navy guy, so I'm not sure. Tell us at that level. I just see it as a potential huge benefit to collaborate across universities, not just in something like this, but across universities, and the power of that kind of region. I'd be interested in your thoughts. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Any questions?
Yeah, let me jump right in there. It's a wonderful, wonderful point. And taking advantage of the power of the network and the ability to leverage networks of networks at this type of level is extremely, extremely important. it's one of the things that attracted me back to Colorado is actually being in this kind of an environment where we have kind of leading R1 universities that actually love working together, sharing best practices with one another, working on joint submissions around new opportunities that will benefit the region. We're in an amazing time with regard to federal funding and the Infrastructure Act and the work toward the hydrogen hubs, for example, and so many other opportunities with the creation, as we heard a little bit today, within NSF and the focus there with the TIP creation and the focus on innovation and impact. It brings us together because we know that there's a very big pot that we can actually stir together and to really build something that will create value that transcends individual organizations' interests and impact the region and impact ultimately the world. And so these types of conversations about how to most effectively collaborate, learn from one another about the things that have worked within the region, leveraging the network of networks around corporate partnerships and access to investors is another dimension that's absolutely spectacularly important.
Yeah, thank you, Walt.
Alex Ignacio, University of Houston. I want to flog the rewards horse some more. So in terms of your institutions, are there rewards for and benefits in terms of innovation? My department is a very traditional department, physics, and the law of the land is publish or perish. Innovation and commercialization and industrialization is kind of antithetical to that department. So how do you address those kind of questions, and how do you solve them in your individual institutions?
Do you want to start?
So Amr,
he knows my answer already. I've been fighting over this for 5 years now. It is an issue a little bit removed from my portfolio, but you look at engineering and College of Engineering in particular, I think innovation is very prized. It is celebrated. Science has been much slower to embrace that, but it's also department-based. People in computer science, which is actually at UH is in science, is more forthcoming, not as much as engineering than physics. Usually, so the basic sciences, there is indeed a culture that eats the strategy for breakfast. Well, that's it for me.
But I'm a fan of going right into the heart of the matter and asking at an institutional level how we find deans who are willing to incentivize their units and bring them. And that is a cultural issue. That is absolutely, but it is that dean level that creates a shift, not a massive change, but a shift in culture in any academic unit. We live in institutions that are governed very differently than any other institution, and we have to take cognizance of that.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge, and as we've been talking, it's also a journey, and it's driven by the top of the organization as well, and the expectations that the president will also help to set with the support of the executive team. At a university like mine's, the fact that we have such a high proportion of industry funding and industry engagement coming with that, it's a different discourse sometimes than in other academic institutions that are perhaps so totally focused on the publication output that they perhaps lose sight of the impact that we all seek to strive for. So it definitely is going to be driven by the people and supported by the culture.
So there is the organizational structures that NSF funded to look at promotions and tenure for the basic science faculty. Is the institutional level of faculty code and all these need to be shifted, and the acceptance required at national level of conversation.
I have to provide a shout out to ASU, where I did work for 5 years before I came to the University of Arizona, because it's the only place I'm aware of that has formal tenure granting capacity for entrepreneurial activities, for innovation activities. And there aren't very many. It's very hard to do. Let me just tell you, as a faculty member, it is enormously challenging. When I was there, it was only in the engineering school, which is very large, but it's a step that I think is absolutely necessary in order to drive kind of that issue of how do we begin to reward that kind of behavior.
And I think the key here that was mentioned a few minutes ago is that's coming straight from the top, from
You bet.
President Carreau, in the clarity of our charter and,
Yep.
and advancing research of public value. So it really does start at the very top with the vision of President Carreau.
Yeah, I just have a quick comments and questions about the multi-institutional collaboration. It's a great word, but when you talk about invention, myself have experienced a huge challenge in that, because it was 4 institutions have one innovation leading by me, but end up for the protection, IP protection, is a big challenge to reach agreement from 4 institutions. And as an inventor myself, I have to carry forward, I have to deal with 4 institutes about the licensing. That is something, I just wanted to point out, it's not an easy path when you talk about protection.
Share IP. Is there any plan in your institutions looking at those across
Again, my short,
to streamline the process?
I think it's really important to embrace complexity instead of fighting and looking for simplicity. And the more you embrace it, the easier it is to find a set of common pathways that allow that kind of challenge. But you got to just go, I'm embracing it. It's going to be really complicated, and I'm going to figure it out.
And shared IP is part of our daily life.
Yeah,
they are
it is.
complex, but it's done everywhere.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's part of creating value at the end of the day to look at the synergy between the inventions from multiple places, institutions.
Yeah, equitable across the collaborating institution. And the speed to finish it is also very important. Sometimes it takes years. So,
often.
Last question.
If I may share my memories and experience. I was an undergraduate at Harvard College and then a graduate student in the Division of Engineering and Applied Physics. This is from 60 to 69. It's publish or perish. Math was on top, theoretical physics was here, experimental phics, which I was there, and engineering was down the street at no Caltech.
but look at us now.
Yeah. But thanks to some changes, thanking Naryara Murthy, who used to be at Bell Labs and I think it's at Sandia, was hired as the dean of the Division of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Thanks to Bill Gates and other people, it became no longer the division, but the Department of Engineering and Applied Science, and that's where computer science is. And then Paulson gave them $400 million, and now it's the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And believe me, engineering is no longer down the street at no Caltech. So leadership change happened. It wasn't from the president of the university, as far as I know, but it was from the leadership that came into that department. And I'm very delighted to have received my doctorate there, even when engineering is down the street at no Caltech.
All right, thank you. Thank you. If there's no other questions, let's thank the panel members for their insightful comment and sharing. Thank you. Thank you, the audience, for staying with us.